Nastagio degli Onesti, in love with a woman of the Traversari family, is unable to win her affection, however much he spends. Implored by his relatives to leave off, he goes to Chiasi, where he sees a knight hunt a young woman down, kill her, and let 2 dogs consume her. Nastagio invites his relatives and the woman he loves to dinner. She sees the aforementioned maiden torn to pieces, and, fearing the like might happen to her, marries Nastagio. When Loretta fell silent, Philomena began, at the queen's command, to tell her story. Dear ladies, just as we women are held in highest regard for our compassionate nature, cruelty in us is correspondingly deplored, and indeed is most severely punished by God's justice. It is in order to make this clear to you, and to motivate you to drive all brutality from yourselves, that I will tell you a story as sad as it is entertaining. Many renowned and aristocratic families have lived in Ravenna, that ancient city in the Romagna region of northern Italy. Among them was the house of the degli Onesti, one of whose members, Nastagio, was left wealthy beyond reckoning by the deaths of his father and uncle. This Nastagio, as often occurs with young unmarried men, fell in love with a young lady, the daughter of Paolo Traversari. Her family was far more distinguished than Nastagio's, but he hoped by splendid expenditures and strategic displays of magnificence to impress himself upon her affections. However, the most imposing, elegant, and admirable shows of wealth and favor not only failed to help, they positively hindered Nastagio's hopes. The adored young woman was ever cruel, hard, and fierce towards him. Perhaps it was her beauty or her noble ancestry, but whatever the reason, she remained disdainful and aloof. Neither Nastagio nor anything he liked was to her liking. Nastagio found the situation hard to bear. More than once his sufferings made him wish to kill himself, but restraining himself from so desperate a measure, he considered that perhaps he should abandon her pursuit and put the maiden entirely from his mind, or even, if he could, learn to hate her as she did him. But all such resolutions were made in vain, and it became apparent that the more hopeless the case was, the more he loved. Since the young man persevered in his reckless affection and expenditure, a number of his friends and relatives feared he would undo both himself and his finances. Many a time they implored or advised him to leave Ravenna and settle somewhere else for a time, so as to ease both his passion and his outlay. And many a time Nastagio laughed at such suggestions, but finally, hemmed in by their requests and having run out of replies, he agreed to do so, and made a great preparation for his trip, as though he meant to head for France or Spain or some other far-off place. He mounted his horse and, accompanied by many traveling companions, he set out from Ravenna and got to a place about 3 hours outside it, where he ordered his tents and pavilions to be erected and announced to his escort that he intended to remain there, that they should return to Ravenna. Having set up camp, Nastagio began to lead a life in the field, if anything more elegant and sumptuous than before, and continued to issue dinner and supper invitations to all his acquaintances. It happened one Friday, at the very beginning of May, when the weather was particularly fine. Nastagio, deeply meditating on his lady's cruelty, ordered his household staff to leave him alone so he could completely enjoy his thoughts. He took a stroll as he pondered, abstractedly placing one foot before the other till he had conveyed himself unawares to the pine forest, and continued thus till nearly noon, by which time he'd come 1/2 mile into the woods, unaware of hunger, or indeed of anything but his own reflections. Suddenly he heard a loud wailing, the high-pitched cries of a woman. He broke off his pleasant meditations, lifted his head to see what it was, and was amazed to find himself in the midst of the pines. He was even more astonished when he gazed straight ahead and saw, coming at a run right at him through a thicket dense with young trees and thorn bushes, a very beautiful and naked young woman, her hair disheveled, scratched all over from her rapid passage through shrubs and brambles, weeping and screaming loud for mercy. Then he noticed large ferocious mastiffs that ran raging close behind her, cruelly biting her as often as they drew even. Then he saw coming after her a dark knight on a black horse, his face contorted with rage, sword in hand, who threatened her with death in coarse, terrifying terms. All this put astonishment into Nastagio's soul, then pity for the luckless lady. This in turn gave rise to a desire to free her, if he could, from such an agonizing death. Finding himself unarmed, he took a fallen branch as a cudgel and moved forward to face the dogs and the knight. But the latter, seeing this, shouted from afar, "Nastagio, don't interfere. Let me and my dogs give this wicked woman what she's deserved."